Good afternoon, YouTube YTPC. Hope you're doing all right today. It's still got a bit of a autumn heat wave here, so it's cloudless and still pretty hot actually. Smoking one of my more recent meerschaum acquisitions, this from White Fang, who Newton Piper recommended in one of his videos, and they do make very nice meerschaum pipes. Using one of these little crow's foot pewter tampers. And of course, today being the verdict day on my investigations into how to conserve fuel for Zippo lighters and those similar ones that use liquid fuel, I'm actually using one of my lighters. This is Redcoat's Return. Can you see that? Engraved. This is a star lighter, not as fancy as a Zippo, but for the very low price they asked for these, they're still pretty good. And this one, although did lose some fuel in the time I was testing it, with this little silicone band here and rubber grommet underneath, it still was able to light after 15 days test, so that's pretty good. Anyway, not to tip everything off, I made a video earlier today. His information is a bit long, so you may want to skip through some bits not so interesting. I did do first half of the talk about the non-Zippo lighters, and the second half more focused on the Zippo lighters. But take a look, see what you think. Right, ladies and gentlemen, now I'd like to present the results of the last almost 3 weeks of tests trying to conserve liquid fuel. So that's this kind of fuel, not the butane gas, in various lighters, with a focus on flip-top lighters, or better known as Zippo-like lighters. And there's a couple of Zippos in my tests here, of course. Well, we talked about this in the previous video. On the left you've got the non-standard liquid fuel lighters, or non-standard not flip-top lighters like the Zippo ones on the right. And I had mentioned before that there are certain liquid fuel lighters which are designed and built with seals in them, and that those ones tend to do very well in fuel conserving. So the examples of those are these Japanese lighters, like this musical lighter I've got here, where you see, of course, the screw, and behind the screw is a nice seal, and there's not really many surfaces or joints where the vapors can escape. And this one has had the same fuel in it for several months. And not only is it playing music, but it has a flame. And you can find lighters like this, and I've got a couple more I'm adding to my collection, which will keep fuel in them very efficiently, and even several months. Another one is this S. Douglas Japanese lighter, which they say will keep its fuel for about a month. And I've been testing this one, and indeed it's getting a bit fainter, the flame, but it is still going, and it's had that fuel in it for about a month. So and that's what they say will do. So there are lighters like that which do a good performance without any need of conservation. Here's this bicycle bell lighter. This is also actually, I think, from a Chinese producer of an antique design. And there you go. And that one I've had 3 weeks in the fuel. That's again with a seal behind the screw here. And it's not quite as good, I think, as the Douglas lighter or the Japanese ones, but it holds its fuel pretty well. And it has a high capacity. It's quite a heavy lighter with a big tank. Part of my tests were these IMCO lighters, which I know a number of people probably have, especially in Germany or Switzerland. And with this one, I had basically, you see, here's the tank here, you fill it up. I put some plumber's tape around here. So with lighters like this, you're going to have to always improvise how you can seal them. And plumber's tape is very thin and very solvent resistant, so it's a pretty good way to try and seal up these kind of lighters. And in this case I just wrapped some around here and then jammed it in and did some tests, and I'll show you the results. It did actually pretty well. So also with these kind of lighters, there's a way to seal them up, but it may not be with any kind of rubber or silicone band or anything like that. And the last one, I had my 1943 BT lighter here. This one did pretty awful in the tests, mainly because I think it's a very large lighter with a lot of interface here and joint face here where vapor can get out, and that's what you have to remember. What's escaping is effectively gas vapor and not liquid, and a gas vapor can get out of the tiniest of joints and holes and gaps to lose the fuel over time. And I had tried with this one to put here, for example, Teflon tape around it and Teflon tape here, but very difficult one to if you like, make efficient in conserving fuel. So some will be easier than others is the lesson of that. So on the right, I've got two standard Zippos. Here's my oldest Zippo, my United States of America brass Zippo. Now what I've done with these is I've tried to use three main ways to conserve the fuel. One is I've put obviously a band around it. This was the cheapest and simplest concept, and I mentioned here Newton Piper, who said basically you can put a rubber band about it, and the best ones are these large, very wide, flat rubber bands, and then I just stapled it together and you get a fairly good flat seal around this joint. It's easier actually if you take it from the bottom down. And then you have basically the lighter as it should be. And I think if you start messing around with putting a silicone seal here or some kind of other alternative, you won't get this, will you? You won't get that. And so I basically was looking at methods that will not affect the look, appearance, and the traditional performance and the sound and the attractiveness of the Zippo. If you had put that to the side and said, I just want fuel conservation, you could have maybe used other ideas, for example, putting silicone here around the joint, because this is the trick. This is basically a sealed object, and if you can just seal around here, nothing will escape. It's harder to do than it sounds. because it's messy with this. Once it dries, you get a kind of rubbery silicone seal, but then you won't get this nice ching, and it won't close that effectively. It's quite tricky to do. Another good idea from someone was to use Sugro, and I got some because I want to experiment with it anyway. But the thing is, Sugro is like Play-Doh, which hardens and sticks to surfaces and has a slight softness when it's finished. But you know, then again, you would see it around here. Even if you put it in the inside, it wouldn't close probably as well. You know, messy, and I'm not sure how stable it would be. So I wanted something that would be, you know, simple, removable, fairly easy to take on and off, and with a bit of practice and adjustment, you know, I'm sure you can optimize the way, but it's basically for storage. So when you're carrying it, you wouldn't necessarily have this band on, but when you're putting it away for a day or two, overnight or something, you can put the band on to reduce the fuel loss. And of course, you know, there are other alternatives. You take here my Zippo with the cross on it, brass armor Zippo. I deliberately took this one because it's got an engraved surface, and I thought, well, how does this perform then if you try and make a seal? And here I took a silicone rubber band here. It's actually this size. You have to take something about half the size of the Zippo to get a good stretch to make sure it's pressing against the surface. And how will that perform? So these things are, if you look around in eBay and various sources from China, whatever, they used a lot in kitchenware and for those kind of things. Some are expensive. Well, I thought, you know, several dollars a band, but you can find them for $1 or less per band, but of course never as cheap as this. That's clear. So this one was a test of how does a Zippo perform if it's not an even surface, and a little bit comparing the silicone band. And then here I've got, actually this is my latest edition, Redcoats Return, engraved lighter. And this one I've got a silicone band on, and it's a flat surface, but it's not a Zippo, it's a Star lighter. They're very inexpensive. I couldn't believe how inexpensive these were, engraved. So I've got a number of them. But I've got other Star lighters, and they perform pretty well. They're not quite as good as Zippos, I agree, but they're if you consider how cheap they are, they're still pretty good. So wanted to see how that would perform. Now, in addition, of course, to the band, what I've done is added the seal, the grommet, to the bottom. So you've seen this before, this grommet here, and I put those on the two Zippos here, the brass ones and this one. So that would be way number 2 to reduce fuel loss. And the third way is again something that that grommet, by the way, as I've mentioned in the last video, came from a guy called Cutlery Lover, and so all of these ideas are actually not mine. The only thing I've done is try to systematically use them and make some measurements. So that's my contribution. And the last concept is the one that was recently presented, firstly by Yardism and secondly by Tillerman, who both have indicated if you take the wick in a Zippo, which is not very well distributed in newer Zippo lighters, you basically have to make sure and the wick is distributed in a kind of S shape over the wool filling inside. So it just means you have to take everything out. It's quite easy to do. Mr. Tillerman, good friend Tillerman, has shown you how to do that in the video, and just make sure the wick is in a nice S shape, and that's very important contribution to longevity, because the fuel basically tends to run down towards the bottom, and if not enough of the wick is getting wetted by the fuel, you will not have the vapor pressure at the top of the wick. You will not have enough fuel there to ignite. And what I found out is most lighters just don't light when they've got down to about 25% remaining fuel. You just don't have enough wetting of the wick to give you enough vapor at the top. So that's another reason that these things tend to run out quickly. There is still fuel in the lighter, not much, but there's still fuel in the lighter, but they are not wetting the wick adequately that you can ignite it. And all of my tests, I found there was usually about 25% fuel still in the wool at the bottom here, but however you did it, it's very hard to make sure that the wick isn't drying out through the rest of the wool, getting all the way up, and then by the time you get to the top that should be lighted, it's just not enough fuel there. So those are the three main ways. I mean, there are some other ideas like keeping your lighters in the fridge to keep the vapor pressure down, but that's probably not very practical. I was just and also I'm sure the wife wouldn't like it either. But plus when they're cold, when you take them out, you have to let them warm up. We all know that cold lighters tend not to light that easily. So I stuck to these three methods because they're things that you have to either just do one time. They don't affect the look and appearance when they're removed. So one or two others I've got here is this little Japanese one, because some of you might be saying, Zippo standard solutions, but what about things which are not sort of standard size? Well, I did find, again, if you look around, you find interesting grommets here. These are rubber, these are a little square, so suited for the shape of a lighter, and there are different sizes of these, and these are used for sort of plumbing and application seals, and these are actually with a bit of silicone rubber in them, and this just happened to fit my little Japanese lighter very well, so I thought I'd try that out. I didn't have a grommet in it because the grommet is standard for normal Zippos, so I couldn't use that, but I did take out the wick and make the Yardism-Tillerman adjustment to try and make sure the wick had as much chance as possible to be soaking on the fuel. Anyway, so without more ado, let's look at some results here. Well, there's 15 days basically recorded here. I've been doing a number of different experiments in addition, but that's the data I've got on these lighters. And what you're seeing at the end, for example, is where it says every 5 days I did a flame test. And you can see then the ones which have gone 15 days and still been able to give a flame. And basically every day I've recorded the weight loss. Generally Zippos hold comfortably 4 grams of fuel. You can get that up to 5 or 5.5, but you have to be careful not to overfill them. So I certainly would say between 4 and 5 grams is for a standard Zippo size normal, but as you've seen, there are different lighters here with different tanks and different sizes, so all I did is tried to fill it till the felt looked wet and started to pool the fuel, waited a little bit and then closed it up, and generally it was between sort of 4 and 5 grams. You see roughly here a few numbers that I've recorded just to see what that was. So here you see the fuel loss graphic with those lighters that I've just been talking about. So let's start with the, it's the good, the bad and the ugly here. So let's start with the worst ones here. This one was losing fuel at a much higher rate every day, and sure enough it's this Christmas lighter, a star lighter. Now in this particular case and this particular test, we basically I put this in as a worst case just to sort of say, if you don't do anything, so there's no grommet here, I didn't put any special measures, and I basically didn't put a seal around it at all, and that's what happens. You see a pretty fast loss, and this one I've managed to fill up to 5 grams. So after a short time, we look up here to see what happened to it. So here's the Christmas card lighter, and you see it didn't even make 5 days, and a lot of commentators were saying, just a few days and the Zippo is empty, and well, this is a star lighter, so it's probably a little bit faster even still. And I would probably say the flame probably wouldn't have even lit after a couple of days. That's the worst performer, but nothing done, and as expected, steep loss and not making even 5 days. The second worst, it had a steeper curve at the beginning, was the BT lighter, and I had mentioned that one before because it's just fairly loose and it's got a huge joint interface here, and even trying with Teflon or whatever, there wasn't really a way to make this into a fuel conserving lighter. So it's a lovely lighter, but it's the sort of one if I had used it, I'd have to top it up every day without any doubt. So number 3 is actually this one, and I had some better expectations of it, that it wouldn't lose at that rate, because here I have a grommet in it, you've seen it, the seal, and I did the yardism trick. The problem, I think, is even with these rubber bands or silicone bands, you've still got here something sticking out, the joint here, and as we know, vapor or gas does need only the tiniest escape, and it will find its way out. Almost every lighter in this list, even including ones which have factory built-in seals, loses maybe 0.1 gram a day, something like that. I'll show you those numbers shortly. So 0 loss is very hard to get. The best one I've got is this one, which has such a good seal and will hold for several months the fuel in it. But nevertheless, after 15 days, so 3 flame tests, I did the tests this morning. Let's see if it's still working. Yeah, there you can barely see it. You see that flicker? it's still lighting. Now that may be partly because I was able to fill it up with a more like 5 grams than 4, which compensated a bit for this rather steep loss curve. But it's still probably improved it from, let's say, the worst case here. So this is the difference. If you don't put a seal and grommet on it, and if you don't use the Yardism Tillerman adjustment of the wick, you know, you're not going to get this improvement. This improvement can really mean a lot in terms of keeping the flame alive. So we've done the BT one, and the next one, let's say, is this brown one here, which is the little Japanese Supreme lighter. So it's this one with, again, using a band. I don't have a grommet on it, just this band, and I've adjusted the wick again according to Yardism and Tillerman. And this morning, this lit. I think it's alive here. Sometimes I have to wiggle the wick a bit. Yeah. See, it's still going. Albeit, you know, after 15 days, the flames are not that strong. And the other point I have to mention is I've just been, you know, storing these and doing a 5-day flame test. If you are using them every day, it's not going to go 15 days, of course. Every flame for about a minute uses, let's say, about 0.1 grams of fuel. So these 15 days, if you are using them every day, several days, times a day, translates into, let's say, a use lifetime, certainly less than the 15 days. It's probably going to be more like a week, about half of that. But even so, I think if it's got a week lifetime, that's still an improvement over 1 or 2 days, which people have been experiencing. So what's the next one on the list is Zippo. That was the Japanese. There's the Zippo Cross. Let's have a look. This one with the silicon seal passed its test this morning. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's going pretty good. I had noticed on that one that this cut engraved surface doesn't help the seal, of course, does it? So it's a bit lower than my USA lighter, which is this one, which has a flat surface. So these will tend to do better with light or no engraving than one that's just deep cut, where the seal just can't quite close the gap. And you see it also in the average fuel loss data here. Let's have a look at that. So this is what you lose a day, you know, over here. This column. And generally you see if you're losing something like 0.2 grams a day, you know, that's not bad. Here, for example, 0.13. Let's look, that was the IMCO. The IMCO did surprisingly well with that Teflon. It actually passed the 10-day past the 10-day. It was the only one apart from my S. Douglas. So my S. Douglas and the IMCO passed the 15-day test just using plumber's tape. And the other ones I was experimenting also with plumber's tape, but no seals and grommets. So clearly the seals and grommets have made quite an improvement in terms of surviving the 15-day flame test. But that's again what you're going to use. If you look here at the of the S. Douglas Japanese lighter, you see the loss was less than 0.1 of a gram a day. That's about as good as you're going to get with a factory one. But we're not far away from that if we're looking, for example, at my Zippo USA lighter, and that's just with this standard rubber band, the cheapest you can get. All I did was use some clips here, staples, to make it nice and tight. That's important, but this basically does a good job. It's the cheapest seal solution must be. So thanks to Newton Piper for that stroke of genius. But the fuel loss per day was really, pretty close to as good as you're going to get. The silicon band was not far away, but again approaching 0.2 grams a day. And on the Starlighter, for some reason, I had a bit higher loss per day over the 15 days. Which I haven't really worked out why that is, apart from the fact we have this external joint here, but we have that on the other Zippos as well. So I don't know if I was not putting the seal on, maybe the seal is not tight enough, I've basically been using these size seals, and maybe this is the smallest one I could get in silicone. And these ones are good for very small lighters, but I couldn't quite stretch it. And the problem is, if you really make it tight, then of course it's hard to get on and off, So it's a balance between convenience and getting the thing off reasonably easily, and these ones are fairly tight, and it takes sort of 30 seconds to get off or something like that. It's still going past its flame test this morning. Yes, there you go. Not very strong, but there it is. Right, so that's coming to the conclusions really here. That was the mini Japanese lighter without, that was just the first test I did with using some plumber's tape. And here we got, as I mentioned, a very good performer. Of the Zippos, the best. This one with a rubber band and a grommet. But of the Zippos, this wins. So a rubber band stapled, put one of those black grommets in, make the S pattern on your wick, and you probably will extend the life of your Zippo 100%, or maybe 300%. If it was only going a few days, I'll guarantee you get a week's use out of it, even if you're using it several times a day, maybe even 2 weeks. It then depends, I think, the model you've got. If it's a flat surface one, this seal will work better. and how many times a day you use. As I said, each flame for about a minute will rob you of 0.1 grams of fuel. And always at the end, there's just a certain minimum level of fuel where the thing won't work anymore. The hydrodynamics, or the so let's say the fuel absorption on the wick, transmission to the top, producing enough vapor pressure to ignite, usually at about a quarter of the weight you put in, it's had it. It just, you will not be able to ignite it. I hope that information helps and gives you some ideas. Certainly other things and seals you can try, and you know, I'm sure the ideas are not exhausted here, but I think this one is quite simple, and you know, just even if you put this on at night after you've finished using it like that, and if you don't like the look of it, you can take the band off during the day. I think it'll certainly give you a minimum of a week, even if you're using it, and all the losses you have in the night in storage, you reduce by these methods. Well, it was pretty interesting overall, I think. But the bottom line is you can extend what was 2 or 3 days to at least a week using these 3 measures that are recommended. Now, I will leave below links to the relevant references, videos from Yardism, Tillerman, about some of the materials I was using, the silicon bands, and also a very old video which someone had been way ahead of us, I think it's about 8 years ago, using bicycle tube as an alternative, very cheap band to put around a Zippo lighter. So and that might be the best of all, I don't know. A certain model of cycle tube that you can get in the States, I think. I'm not so sure about here, but anyway, just for completeness, I'll add that. I hope those of you who have Zippos and are thinking about a gas insert, that's definitely going to give you a longer longevity of fuel than any of the measures I've got here. But in case you like using fuel in traditional Zippos, this will at least help you to get a bit more out of it. If I forgot to introduce my tobacco, it's Ennerdale Flake. Beautiful, I love it. Right, so I'll keep the ending here short because the video was long. Wish you all a lovely midweek and hope things go well for you. Take care, all of those in the south coast of the US, Alabama, especially Cliff Higgins. Look after yourself, mate, and your family, and all take care out there. Cheers everyone, bye bye.